The air in the marketplace of Sigilmasa did not simply hang heavy with heat, it vibrated with it, a tangible, suffocating shroud woven through with the scents of dried figs, goat leather, and the sour sweat of 100 weary travelers. But it was the silence that was truly unnerving, a silence that swallowed the clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the haggling of merchants whenever the towering figure of the caravan leader, Jamal al-Saif, walked by. Jamal was a man carved from the desert itself, lean, sinewy, his face a map of sun-etched lines, and his eyes, a startling crystalline blue, were the color of an oasis mirage. He was the undisputed master of the unforgiving Timbuktu Trail, the man who could lead you through the land of thirst and deliver you and your goods to the Niger River. But today, 2 weeks before the great caravan was set to depart, it wasn't Jamal's reputation that drew the silent, watchful gaze of the market. It was a single, tiny, almost imperceptible detail. As Jamal bent to secure a saddlebag on his favorite camel, Qadir, the powerful, a small silver glint flashed from beneath the loose linen fabric of his kufiya. It wasn't the dull silver of a common coin. It was the precise, razor-sharp edge of a coin minted not 1,000 miles away in Fez, but 2,000 miles east, in the forgotten, cursed city of Akkad. An Akkad coin, a coin rumored to be the key to a treasure so old it predated the pyramids, a treasure believed to be the reason for Akkad's mysterious, violent disappearance from history. And Jamal, the trusted Bedouin guide, was hiding it. The departure. The caravan finally set out under the brutal hammer of the midday sun. It was a motley collection of humanity. Dr. Elias Thorne, the scholar, a rigid, tweed-clad Englishman, obsessed with finding the legendary lost manuscript of the Library of Alexandria, rumored to have been carried south by Berber tribes. He carried only books and an almost debilitating sense of academic superiority. Aisha bint Tariq, the merchant, a sharp-eyed woman from Marrakesh, traveling with a fortune in salt and copper, her loyalty purely to profit. She mistrusted everyone, especially Jamal, whom she paid handsomely but watched constantly. The alchemist's apprentice, the enigma, a young man named Kale, quiet and pale, escorting a sealed heavy chest supposedly containing rare tinctures and oils for a sultan far to the south. He never spoke unless spoken to, and he carried a hidden, sheathed dagger in the lining of his robe. Jamal rode at the head, his eyes scanning the horizon, not just for sand dunes, but for the invisible shifts in the wind, the warnings of the Ghibli. He felt the weight of the silver coin, now secured deep inside a leather pouch against his chest, near his heart. He knew what the coin meant. He knew the legends. He also knew the map inscribed on its reverse, a faint set of scratches only visible when the moonlight hit it just right, didn't lead to a sultan's jewels or gold ingots. It led to something far more dangerous, something he had sworn an oath to protect, not discover. The desert was a living entity to Jamal, one that tested the weak and consumed the greedy. He listened to its whispers, and today they weren't about the sandstorm brewing on the edge of the world. They were about the people behind him. First night's fire. As the desert swallowed the sun in a blaze of violent orange and violet, the camp settled. The camels knelt, grumbling, and the small, carefully hoarded fire gave off a thin spiral of smoke. Dr. Thorne, adjusting his spectacles, cleared his throat by the fire. "Jamal," he said, his voice crisp and dismissive, "I assume you have calculated our trajectory precisely. I must avoid the Erg Chebi. Its history is
unfortunate for scholarly endeavors. Jamal stirred the sweet mint tea. "The desert has its own path, Doctor," he replied in a low gravel. "We follow the sun and the stars, not your charts." Aisha scoffed, pulling her thick cloak tighter despite the heat radiating from the ground. "He means he takes the path with the fewest bandits. Doctor, leave your dusty books alone. Focus on the sand." Kale, the apprentice, sat separate from the others, his back to the chest he guarded. He did not look at anyone, but his eyes darted to the dark mound of Jamal's sleeping gear. Jamal saw the glance. He saw all the glances. Greed was a scent sweeter than the dates they were chewing, and it radiated off his companions like a heat shimmer. That night, as the others slept, or pretended to sleep, Jamal did not seek his blanket. He took a small, specialized metal detector, a discreet, modern tool given to him by a mysterious contact years ago, and walked 100 yards from the camp. He swept it over a specific patch of seemingly ordinary sand near a dune shaped like a resting sphinx. The device gave a faint, rhythmic ping, ping, ping. It was only a few feet down. Buried here, beneath the indifferent sands of the Sahara, was the true first part of his treasure, and it was not the Akkad coin. That was merely a lure. It was a detonator. He looked back at the flickering fire where 3 souls slept, each hungry for a piece of the secret. "They think they are following a guide," he thought, adjusting the earth back over the device with practiced ease. "They are following a trap."
He gestured pointedly at the heavy, sealed chest he was guarding. The implication was clear. Leave the chest behind to save the water. It was a reasonable suggestion, but the way Kyle asked it, with a curious, almost challenging intensity, made Jamal pause. "The chest goes with us, apprentice," Jamal said, his hand unconsciously resting on the silver Akkad coin hidden beneath his robes. "Its contents are more valuable than water or life to the man who awaits it." He spurred Kadir forward, leaving the group to argue amongst themselves as the oppressive grainy yellow cloud rushed toward them. The Valley of the Dead. They reached the Wadi al-Maut just as the first stinging whips of sand began to lash the desert floor. It was a narrow, deep fissure in the earth, shaped like a serpent's bite, offering crucial protection from the horizontal fury of the wind. They quickly sheltered the camels and goods, securing the cargo, especially Kyle's heavy chest, deep within a shallow cave mouth. The roar of the sandstorm outside was deafening, a sound like 1,000 angry hornets swarming a drum. The visibility dropped to 0. Inside the cave, a nervous silence took hold. Dr. Thorne used the opportunity to continue his research, pulling out a faded map. "Remarkable," he muttered, tracing a line with a grimy finger. "This valley is marked on my oldest chart as a holy site. They say a great pillar once stood here, guiding the lost." Aisha, seeing Jamal distracted, decided to test the waters. She approached him, offering a small pouch of rare dried dates. "Jamal," she began, her voice low and conspiratorial, "we both know these storms can last for days. If our situation becomes dire, your skill will save us, and skill deserves reward. I heard a whisper in Sigilmasa, a foolish tale perhaps, about a certain coin you possess, a coin from Akkad." Jamal took the dates, his gaze steady, devoid of emotion. "The desert gives you dates, Aisha, and it gives you sand. Do not believe every whisper the wind carries." "But I believe the glint of silver I saw," she pressed, leaning closer. "If that coin leads to a greater treasure, share your knowledge. I can fund the excavation. We split the profit, 50-50. Just as Jamal was about to reply, Kyle's sharp voice cut through the storm's roar. 50-50 of what, merchant?" Kyle had moved swiftly to the entrance of the cave, looking out into the blinding, swirling yellow chaos. He announced, "The wind is changing directions. It's not just driving into the canyon. It's swirling around a single point." Jamal's eyes narrowed. Kyle was right. The storm, instead of sweeping past, seemed to be carving a circular vortex directly outside their shelter. "This is not natural," Jamal murmured, dropping the dates. He grabbed a lantern and peered at the churning sand wall just 10 feet from the cave entrance. Suddenly, the wind pulled back, as if taking a huge, gasping breath. For a fraction of a second, the sand cleared, creating a momentary vacuum of calm. In that brief, blinding silence, a shadow was revealed. It wasn't rock. It was a perfectly straight, vertical line carved into the cliff face, hidden for centuries by the shifting dunes. The storm had temporarily swept away the desert's curtain. "The pillar," whispered Dr. Thorne, dropping his map. "It wasn't a pillar. It was a door." Jamal didn't hesitate. He knew the Akkad coin was key to something, perhaps this. He threw off his outer robe, revealing the pouch tied tightly to his waist. "The storm will cover it again in moments," Aisha cried, her greed overcoming her fear. "Stay back," Jamal commanded. Drawing a short, heavy knife, he rushed toward the revealed seam in the rock, thrusting the knife deep into the crack, desperately trying to pry the entrance open before the Sahara reburied its secret. As the storm roared back to life, Kyle made his move. Not toward the door, but toward the guide. With a speed that belied his quiet demeanor, Kyle reached out and grabbed the guide's wrist, not to stop him, but to steady him, and to feel the hard outline of the coin beneath the fabric. "What do you seek, guide? Gold or the other thing?" And then, with a horrifying, grinding sound, the rock door gave way. The opening of the stone door was not a grand, dramatic event, but a slow, agonizing grind of ancient rock against rock, releasing a blast of air that was stale, cool, and carried the unmistakable scent of ozone and deep earth. Jamal wrenched the heavy knife free and stepped back, his chest heaving. The gap was barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. He glanced back at his companions, their faces illuminated in the lantern light, a tableau of fear and feverish anticipation. "No one moves," Jamal ordered, his voice echoing oddly against the muffled roar of the storm outside. He looked directly at Kyle, whose usually placid expression was now intense. "You, apprentice, guard the entrance. No one enters until I say so, not even the doctor." Dr. Thorne bristled, clutching his map. "Sir, this could be a site of immense scholarly significance. If this is connected to Akkad, the knowledge inside is infinitely more valuable than any treasure." Aisha pushed forward, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "Knowledge. I smell copper and gems. We go together, guide. I didn't pay you to be the sole recipient of fate's bounty." Just as Aisha was about to argue, Jamal produced a second, smaller, heavy leather satchel from his inner coat. He tossed it to her. "Inside that bag are provisions for 3 days. If I am not back by the 3rd dawn, take the animals and the chest and continue south. If you try to follow me, I will seal the door from the inside." He didn't wait for their response. He ducked his head, shimmied his shoulders, and squeezed through the gap, stepping onto a platform of smooth, black basalt. The Guardian's Path. The passage descended into an inky blackness, the air growing colder with every step. He ignited a small oil lamp he carried, revealing a narrow spiral staircase cut into the stone. The walls were covered not in hieroglyphs, but in deep, precise carvings of geometric patterns that seemed to shift and warp in the flickering light. He reached the bottom of the steps, finding himself in a long, high-ceilinged corridor that felt as if it had been buried since time began. The silence here was absolute, heavier than the storm bow. He reached into his robe and retrieved the Akkad coin. In this subterranean environment, the silver seemed to absorb the light. He held it up,
and suddenly the faint scratches on its reverse side, the map, pulsed with a dim, violet luminescence. The coin was not a map of physical coordinates. It was a key reacting to the energy of the forgotten city. He followed the direction the luminescence pointed, navigating through 3 branching tunnels. Each tunnel was lined with empty niches. Then he heard it, a sound that made the hairs on his neck stand up. Not the sound of an animal or falling rock, but the faint, rhythmic clink, clink, clink of metal on stone. Someone was already here. Jamal extinguished his lamp immediately, trusting his Bedouin eyes to adjust to the faint ambient light reflecting off the strange, polished rock. He pressed his back against the cold wall, heart hammering against the silver coin. The trap is sprung, he realized. But who set it? The encounter. He edged forward, silent as a desert viper, until he reached a wide chamber. In the center, bathed in the beam of a modern electric flashlight, stood Dr. Thorne. The scholar was not reading ancient texts. He was chipping frantically at the floor with a geologist's hammer, his face slick with sweat and his spectacles askew. But he was not alone. Standing over Thorne was Kyle, the alchemist's apprentice. Kyle held no tinctures. Instead, he held the long, sheathed dagger that Jamal had seen hidden in his robe, now drawn and gleaming. "Faster, doctor," Kyle commanded, his voice devoid of the youthful deference he displayed above ground. "The vibrations of the storm will cover the noise of your digging for only so long. We need the keystone." "I'm almost there, damn you," Thorne hissed, his hands shaking. "The readings show the density shift right here. It's buried beneath the floor." Jamal understood everything in that terrifying moment. Kyle and Thorne were not companions. They were co-conspirators. The heavy chest Kyle guarded wasn't filled with oils. It contained the equipment for this. And the legendary lost manuscript Thorne sought was a lie to lure him onto the caravan. But what were they digging for? As an answer, Thorne's hammer struck something hollow. He threw the hammer aside and scraped away the dirt, revealing a perfectly smooth circle of obsidian set into the floor. "The keystone," Kyle breathed, his eyes wide. Jamal decided this was the moment. He stepped into the light, the oil lamp now fully lit, illuminating the chamber. "A keystone to what, apprentice?" Jamal asked, his voice low and dangerous. Kyle spun around, the dagger flashing toward Jamal's throat, but Jamal was faster. He slapped the weapon aside with a practiced movement and delivered a stunning kick to Kyle's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Kyle collapsed with a strangled gasp. Before Jamal could secure Kyle, Dr. Thorne scrambled backward, pulling something small and black from his coat pocket. Not a research tool, but a sleek, modern GPS locator. "You fool, Jamal," Thorne cried, terrified. "This is not your treasure. This keystone is the control mechanism for the Akkadian resonance device, the greatest weapon ever created. And now that we have located it, they will be here soon to collect it. I sold your location for the honor of its discovery. You and your coin are now bait." Jamal looked from the beeping locator to the black obsidian keystone. He knew then that the secret treasure wasn't gold, or even knowledge. It was power. A power that was about to bring the full, violent force of the modern world down upon the Valley of the Dead. The chamber was plunged into chaos. Kyle was still struggling to catch his breath on the floor, while Dr. Thorne, manic and terrified, pointed the small GPS beacon skyward. The persistent, high-pitched beep, beep, beep was not just a signal. It was a death warrant. Jamal realized the true horror of this situation. He had been so focused on guarding the hidden location from discovery that he had not considered the possibility of betrayal from within the caravan itself. A betrayal orchestrated by those seeking not gold, but a destructive technology. He lunged for Thorne. "You have doomed us all, academic!" Thorne shrieked and threw the beacon. It hit the wall and shattered, but the signal had already been sent, stabbing through the 100 feet of rock and sand above them. "They will be here in hours," Thorne stammered, scrambling to hide behind a pillar. "A private security detail," They want the device. They promised me tenure and recognition." Jamal ignored the whimpering scholar. He grabbed Kyle by the neck, dragging him upright. "Who are they, apprentice? Who hired you? What is this resonance device?" Kyle coughed, spitting dust. "It is the reason Akkad died," he gasped out, his eyes still defiant. "A weapon that vibrates matter to dust. I was sent by the Syndicate, a group that deals in ancient power. They knew the Akkad coin was a key, a magnet for the true treasure. They just needed a guide to bring them here." "And the chest of oils?" Jamal pressed, his grip tight. "A counter device," he whispered, "to scramble the device's energy signature if we couldn't control it. Now it's above ground, useless." Jamal shoved Kyle hard against the wall, then turned his attention to the obsidian keystone in the floor. He knew that the Syndicate would follow the GPS signal, but they would need to locate the entrance first. His priority was sealing the chamber. He pulled the Akkad coin from his pouch. Holding it over the obsidian circle, he felt a powerful, almost sickening surge of heat. The luminescent lines on the coin's surface glowed brilliant electric blue. As the light pulsed, the air in the chamber grew dense. He heard a faint, deep hum emanating from the rock itself. He realized he wasn't just sealing a door. He was interacting with the core of the ancient city's power source.
Suddenly, a commotion sounded from the spiral staircase above. A shadow appeared. Then the figure of Aisha, the merchant, descending rapidly. She had ignored Jamal's order and followed him into the abyss. She slid to a stop, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. The defeated scholar, the captured apprentice, the humming obsidian, and Jamal, radiating the strange blue light of the Akkad coin. A resonance device? A syndicate? Aisha's face was a mask of furious realization. I gambled my entire season's profit on salt and copper, and you tell me this is a trap? She glanced at Kyle's abandoned dagger. She snatched it up. Where is the real entrance to the gold? She demanded, pointing the blade first at Thorn, then at Jamal. I want my investment, guide. The gold is irrelevant, Aisha, Jamal roared over the rising hum. We have triggered a homing beacon. We need to seal this place now. Aisha, blinded by greed and rage, misinterpreted his urgency. She thought he was trying to hide the final stage of the treasure. With a cry of pure frustration, she lunged not at Kyle, but at the humming keystone. If there's no gold, I'll take the power, she screamed, bringing the dagger down hard on the obsidian surface. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The blade, a simple iron alloy, struck the charged obsidian. A blinding, deafening arc of electric blue energy exploded outward. Aisha was thrown violently back against the wall, dropping the dagger, a thin plume of smoke rising from her scorched hand. The blast of energy, however, didn't just injure her. It overloaded the subtle mechanism Jamal was trying to control with the coin. With a final terrifying crack, the keystone did not seal the door. It initiated an emergency shutdown sequence for the entire chamber. Trapped. Dust and small pieces of ceiling rained down. The spiral staircase began to shake violently. The ancient locking mechanisms were not just closing the passage, they were collapsing it. We're trapped, Thorn wailed. Jamal grabbed the stunned Aisha and slung her over his shoulder. He looked at Kyle, who was now slowly rising, a wicked smile spreading across his lips. The Syndicate will not be pleased that I failed to secure the device, but they will be delighted that I successfully trapped the famous guide, Jamal al-Saif, with the key. Jamal ignored him. The main stone door was already beginning to rumble closed above. He had only seconds. He dragged the still-dazed Aisha and Dr. Thorne into a side passage, a secondary service tunnel he had noted on the way down. This tunnel leads to the old ventilation shaft, Jamal shouted over the grinding rock. It's the only way out. Just as they disappeared into the narrow passage, Kyle, seeing his escape route closing, made a final desperate act.
He plunged the dagger into the obsidian keystone, twisting the blade, ensuring the chamber's lock was permanent. Then, with a final massive roar, the spiral staircase completely collapsed, burying the entrance in tons of ancient rock. Jamal, Thorn, and Aisha were trapped in the crushing dark, deep beneath the Sahara, with a lethal artifact sealed just yards behind them, and a professional mercenary squad closing in fast on the surface above. The darkness of the service tunnel was absolute, thicker than any desert night. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of wet earth and ancient decay. Jamal had managed to drag both Aisha and Dr. Thorne into the passage just before the main staircase imploded. Now the passage was shrinking, forcing them into a single-file procession. "The keystone!" Aisha gasped, clutching her burned hand, her earlier avarice replaced by primal fear. "Did he escape? Kael? That snake? Did he get out?" Jamal, leading the way, his back pressing against the rough stone, said grimly, "The collapse was total. He is buried with the mechanism he sought to control, and if he wasn't, the Syndicate will ensure he never speaks again." Dr. Thorne, struggling with his tweed coat and map, was near hysterical. "The resonance device! It's sealed now! If we can't control it, no one can! That's a comfort, isn't it? A comfort!" "Comfort is for the dead, Doctor," Jamal spat out. "We are now underground bait. The Syndicate security team will have arrived on the surface. They won't leave until they find the device, and they know the guide holds the key, the coin. They will be looking for this passage." He reached a section where the tunnel began a steep upward incline. A grating, heavily corroded with rust, blocked the path. "The ventilation shaft," Jamal confirmed. "It goes straight up. It's our only exit, but it is ancient and likely unstable." The price of knowledge. As Jamal struggled to pry the grating open with the heel of his boot, Aisha, temporarily stunned into silence, looked at Thorne. Her fear curdled into bitter resentment. "You let us here," she accused, pointing a trembling finger. "You knew what this was, not a library, not gold, but a weapon. You risked our lives for recognition." Thorne whimpered. "The world needs to know about Akkad's power. The manuscript was the truth. The city was destroyed not by invasion, but by an uncontrollable weapon. The resonance device. It's proof that civilization can destroy itself." "And you thought selling that proof to a shadowy cabal of criminals was the best way to disseminate knowledge?" Jamal said, finally kicking the grating free with a screech of metal. Aisha's eyes narrowed. The merchant in her, the ultimate pragmatist, resurfaced. "He's carrying something valuable, Guide. His notes, the map that led him to this exact spot." Jamal stopped. "Give me the map, Doctor. The Syndicate will be searching for any means to bypass the collapse."
Thorne clutched the faded parchment to his chest. "No, this is my life's work. The coordinates, the formulas, it's all there." Aisha acted quickly. She lunged, snatching the map from Thorne's grasp. The paper tore with a soft, final rip. "If it leads them here, it's a liability," she said, her voice hard. She didn't destroy it entirely, though. Instead, she crammed the largest, most crucial piece of the map, the section detailing the subterranean geography, into her waistband. The rest, detailing only the irrelevant surface coordinates, she tossed onto the muddy floor. The ascent. "Forward," Jamal commanded, pushing Thorne toward the exposed shaft. "We must climb, fast. If they find the entrance to the shaft, they will flood it with gas or simply wait us out." The ventilation shaft was a tight, vertical chimney. The ascent was agonizing. The ancient iron rungs embedded in the wall were slippery with condensed moisture and crumbling rock dust. Dr. Thorne, soft and unused to physical labor, was a dead weight. Aisha, despite her injury, proved surprisingly resilient, driven by a desperate will to survive. They climbed in near silence, the only sounds their rasping breaths and the scraping of metal against stone. After what felt like an hour of muscle-burning ascent, Jamal felt a faint,
blessed current of fresh air. They were nearing the top. He hauled himself onto the narrow lip of the shaft and peered out. They had emerged into a small rocky crevice, still deep within the Wadi al-Maut. The raging sandstorm had abated, replaced by a still, pre-dawn silence, a silence that was far more menacing than the storm. He saw the evidence immediately. Not 50 yards away, scattered amongst the dunes, were fresh tire tracks, heavy-duty, military-grade vehicles. And resting beside a large outcrop, shielded from the wind, was a small two-man camp, sleek and professional. They were here. The syndicate's retrieval team had already arrived. Jamal gently pulled Aisha and Thorn out of the shaft. "The good news," Jamal whispered, pulling a small bone-handled knife from his boot, "is we are out of the ground." He paused, glancing at the shadowy outlines of the camp. "The bad news," he finished, "is that they have our camp, our camels, and our water, and they are waiting for the guide to make an appearance." He looked at Aisha, then at Thorn. Their choices had led them here. Now they had to face the consequences together. "We have two options," Jamal whispered. "Fight for the water, or vanish into the desert before the sun exposes us." The air was frigid, the sharp, deceptive cold that precedes a desert sunrise. Jamal crouched low in the rocky fissure, the small professional camp of the syndicate agents, visible 50 yards away. The silence was the most dangerous enemy. It meant the agents were alert, disciplined, and possibly watching the periphery. Dr. Thorne, shivering violently, whispered, "We must appeal to them, explain the scientific importance. I'll tell them the keystone is sealed." "They are not archaeologists, Doctor. They are collectors of power, and they will assume you are lying. They want the coin, the key, and they want me to lead them back down." Aisha, the merchant, was already stripping her outer robes, preparing for movement. Her pragmatic mind had taken over. "We have water, but they have men. We have neither. We must choose the greater risk." She pointed to the dark shapes of their caravan camp, just beyond the syndicate's position, hidden from the entrance of the wadi by a dune. "The camels are there. If we move fast, we can take Qadir and maybe 2 water skins, a swift, silent strike." Jamal shook his head slowly. "Too risky. They are professionals. If they hear a sound, they will shoot first and ask about the coin later. I saw the tracks of their vehicles. They have high-powered rifles. We cannot fight them." "Then what is the alternative?" Thorne wailed near tears. Jamal looked at the vast, featureless horizon, where the first faint band of pearl gray was appearing, the promise of a brutally hot sun. He said, "The long walk. We move east, away from the trade route and their vehicles. We will use the shadows of the morning dunes for cover. We trade 3 days of thirst for a chance at freedom. They will not track 3 unarmed people on foot across open desert." Aisha nodded, her fear settling into grim determination. "The sun will be our enemy, but it will also hide our tracks once the heat rises." "Then let us pray to the desert gods," Jamal said. He handed his bone-handled knife to Aisha. "You lead. Keep your eyes on the high dunes. No noise, no mistakes." They moved instantly, not toward the caravan, but away from it. The trek out of the wadi was agonizingly slow. They stayed low, using every shadowed crevice and rock formation as cover. The tension was a physical force. Every tiny scrape of a boot on the sand sounded like thunder. As they reached the lip of the valley, a sound reached them, the muffled professional chatter of a 2-way radio from the syndicate camp. They were confirming their location, waiting for the sun to rise and expose their prey. They held their breath, pressed flat against the rock until the sound faded. Then they began the long walk. For the first 2 hours, the movement was easy, powered by adrenaline and the sheer cold of the night. But as the sun crested the horizon, it was not the gentle warmth of morning. It was an explosion of brutal, scorching light. The desert became a flat, unforgiving canvas. There were no shadows, only blinding glare. They were reduced to 3 small, exposed figures moving across a landscape designed to kill. Jamal forced them to ration their breathing. Small sips of air. Think only of the next footstep. Thorn was the first to falter. After only 4 hours of walking, the heat and exhaustion broke his composure. I can't go on," he gasped, dropping to his knees. His lips were already cracked, and his face, usually flushed with English color, was ashen. "I need water. I need rest. I confessed everything. I just wanted the honor." "Get up, doctor," Ayesha commanded, shaking his shoulder. "Your honor won't buy you an hour of life out here." Jamal stopped. He knew they couldn't abandon Thorn, but they couldn't afford a delay. They were too exposed. He pulled the Akkad coin from his pouch. "Thorn," Jamal said, his voice flat, "I know why you really wanted the keystone. It wasn't just for knowledge. The legends say it can not only destroy matter, but also preserve it. Akkad was a laboratory, not just an armory. The legends say the keystone holds the secret to eternal life." Thorn's eyes widened, a flash of pure, desperate greed momentarily overcoming his exhaustion. "The Fountain of Akkad?" "Yes," Jamal lied, pressing the coin's cold metallic surface against Thorn's forehead. "Now, get up. The syndicate is not after a dead man. They want the coin, and they want the knowledge that you carry. We move, or I will leave you here to be found, and believe me, their interrogation will be slow." The threat worked. Spurred by a fresh wave of terror and greed, Thorn scrambled to his feet. The mirage. By midday, the heat was a palpable hammer, beating the sanity out of them. Mirages danced on the horizon, false lakes, shifting palms, and worst of all, the illusion of distant, dust-covered vehicles. Ayesha, despite her resilience, was suffering. The burn on her hand was blistering, and the piece of the subterranean map she had crammed into her waistband was now just a sweat-soaked clump. "Guide, how do you know where you are going? The sun is directly overhead, no shadows." Jamal didn't look at the sun. He looked down at the sand. He pointed to a faint, almost invisible line of shells and smooth, flat stones, a geological anomaly that marked the bed of an ancient, pre-Sahara river. "The desert never forgets where the water once was. We follow the river's ghost. It is the only place we might find something beneath the surface." Just as he finished the sentence, a low, persistent hum cut through the silence. It wasn't the wind or the heat. It was mechanical. They threw themselves behind the shelter of a small, scrubby bush, the only cover available for miles. High above them, a black, sleek, unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, appeared, crossing the burning sky like a predatory insect. The syndicate had found them. The GPS signal had only led the ground crew to the location. The UAV was their eyes, searching the vast expanse for 3 heat signatures moving away from the blast site. Jamal watched the drone. It was too high for them to evade detection for long. He knew its search pattern would narrow in moments. He looked at the dusty scrub bush they were hiding behind. It wouldn't conceal their body heat from the drone's thermal sensors. He looked down at the Akkad coin in his hand, the key to the resonance device. He had one chance to confuse the thermal signature and throw the drone off their trail. A desperate, dangerous, and painful gamble. The black, silent predator in the sky, the Syndicate's UAV, was now circling, its high-resolution thermal sensors undoubtedly painting their desperate figures on a screen miles away. The drone was systematically tightening its search grid. Jamal knew their small bush offered no protection from heat detection. They had to break the pattern, and immediately. "Aisha, the water," Jamal commanded, his voice barely a whisper, yet sharp with urgency. "Guide, we have no water. We made the choice to walk." "No," Jamal corrected, pulling a small, corked clay vial from a hidden pocket in his inner belt. "It is not for drinking. It is for this." He quickly handed it to her. The water was lukewarm, but it was liquid. "Dr. Thorne," Jamal said, fixing the petrified scholar with a look of iron will. "You go now. Take the vial. Follow the line of the riverbed. Move slowly, constantly, but stay out of the sight of the UAV's direct path." Thorne gaped. "Where? Alone? What about you?" "You are the bait, Doctor," Jamal said grimly. "The UAV will spot your movement. Aisha, when he is 30 paces away, soak him with this water, focusing on his head and chest. It will cool his thermal signature momentarily, but the sight of a moving man will draw the drone's primary focus." He looked at Aisha. "You and I wait here. When the UAV is directly overhead, we run west. We cross its path, fast, and confuse the thermal reading. We become ghosts." Aisha understood the brutal calculation instantly. You want to split the Syndicate's focus, a moving body to draw the eye, a burst of movement to draw the thermal sensor. Thorne, fueled by survival instinct, snatched the vial. He scrambled away, low to the ground, moving like a terrified crab.
Aisha uncorked the vial and hurled the water at Thorne. It struck him full in the chest and head, the sudden coolness a temporary shock. The UAV immediately descended slightly, confirming the anomaly. The thermal image of Thorne would have been clear, a rapidly moving, distressed human target. "Run!" Jamal yelled at Thorne. As the drone's attention locked on to the single desperate figure moving east, Jamal grasped Aisha's wrist. "West!"
Aisha uncorked the vial and hurled the water at Thorne. It struck him full in the chest and head, the sudden coolness a temporary shock. The UAV immediately descended slightly, confirming the anomaly. The thermal image of Thorne would have been clear, a rapidly moving, distressed human target. "Run!" Jamal yelled at Thorne. As the drone's attention locked onto the single desperate figure moving east, Jamal grasped Aisha's wrist. "West, now!" They broke cover and sprinted across the sand. They weren't trying to outrun the drone. They were creating a secondary, more rapid heat signature that would confuse the algorithm. They ran diagonally to the drone's flight path, forcing it to choose which target was more important. The drone hesitated, its flight path stuttering. It had clear sight of Thorne, but now two new fast-moving heat sources were flashing into its field of view. It chose the primary target, the group that had just broken cover. It banked sharply toward Jamal and Aisha. Jamal saw the dark silhouette change angle. "It's coming for us." He skidded to a stop behind a low rise of sand. He shoved Aisha down. "Stay down! Cover to your face! I have to blind it!" He pulled the Akkad coin from his pouch. Holding it up, he positioned it perfectly so the blazing midday sun caught the polished silver. The coin, crafted from an alloy that seemed to attract and amplify energy, became a single, blinding point of light. Jamal aimed the sharp, amplified glare directly into the drone's optical sensors. Escape through desperation. The result was immediate and violent. The high-powered camera lens of the UAV could not handle the focused intensity of the solar glare amplified by the Akkad alloy. There was a sudden flash, followed by a puff of smoke. The drone, its optical system shorted out, tumbled slightly, its guidance system failing. It didn't crash, but it was temporarily blind and flying erratically, relying only on pre-programmed coordinates. "Now," Jamal pulled Aisha up. "We run towards the drone's last known trajectory. It will assume we moved in the opposite direction. We use its momentum against it." They ran in the direction the drone had come from, essentially running back toward the collapse site, but veering off onto a new line of dunes. They were doubling back, placing themselves directly between the blind drone and the terrified Thorn. Aisha glanced over her shoulder. Thorn, seizing the moment of confusion, had already vanished over a dune, running toward the distant, hazy outline of the Atlas Mountains, the last bastion of civilization. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs were shaking. When they finally collapsed behind a large, sun-baked rock formation, the silence returned, unbroken save for their rasping breaths. They had escaped the drone. They had sacrificed their only water and split their meager company, but they had bought time. "Thorn has the vial and his memory," Aisha managed to wheeze out. "He will find help, or he will die trying." Jamal didn't reply immediately. He knew the true danger wasn't just the syndicate, but the desert itself. He looked at the small silver coin in his hand, the coin that had just saved their lives by acting as a targeted lens. "Now," Jamal said, wiping the sweat from his eyes, "we find what is left of the Salt Merchant's map. The desert is wide, but if we have no destination, we will die slowly. We must find the oasis of the forgotten." He was banking everything on the small, sweat-soaked piece of paper Aisha had torn from Thorn's map, the piece detailing the subterranean geography. If that piece of paper could survive the desert, it might lead them to the only guaranteed water source for hundreds of miles. The intense exertion and the lack of water quickly took their toll. The sun climbed higher and higher, relentless, burning the moisture from their bodies. They moved slowly, conserving energy, forcing themselves to believe in the existence of the oasis of the forgotten. Jamal knelt behind a dune, his eyes bloodshot, watching the horizon. The drone was gone, but he knew the ground team, the professional security agents, would now be mobilizing, using their thermal data to sweep the area. They had perhaps an hour before the syndicate's vehicles caught up. Aisha, pale and breathing shallowly, fumbled with the damp, crumbling piece of paper she had ripped from Dr. Thorne's map. "It's ruined, Guide," she rasped, her lips cracked. "The sweat, it's turning to mush." The merchant's fear was now a physical pain. The paper, once a crucial key, was a sodden mess of ink and pulp. Jamal gently took the map fragment. He didn't try to read the ink lines which had dissolved into meaningless smudges. Instead, he studied the texture and the creases. Thorn wasn't interested in the path to an oasis, Jamal noted, his voice strained from thirst. He was interested in the path to the resonance device. This piece, the subterranean part, is all we need. He held the fragile paper up against the sunlight. The ink is gone, but the indentations of his stylus remain. Look! Aisha leaned closer. In the right light, the pressure of Thorn's original drawing on the paper, the outline of the underground caverns, was faintly visible. Jamal traced the deepest crease. This is the outline of the main Akkad chamber, and this, connecting to it, is a secondary tunnel, not a service shaft. It leads... He paused, his blue eyes widening with understanding. It leads to an ancient underground reservoir, the source of the oasis of the forgotten.
The oasis wasn't a natural spring.
It was a deep, centuries-old cistern fed by hidden underground tributaries, a lifeline known only to a few desert elders. "We follow the ghost of this map," Jamal declared, rising slowly. "East-northeast. Fast." The pursuers. They moved with renewed desperate purpose, driven by the geometric shape etched onto the ruined map. They found the terrain changing. The sand became coarser, punctuated by low, striated rock formations. They had been walking for nearly an hour when they heard the sound that shattered their desperate hope, the distant, powerful roar of engines. "Vehicles," Jamal whispered, pulling Aisha into the tight shadow of a granite boulder. "3 of them, perhaps 4. They are closing in." The syndicate had not wasted time. They were using the speed of their customized off-roaders to sweep the grids provided by the UAV before its failure. They were professional, precise, and now they were angry. "They will be looking for tracks or heat signatures," Aisha murmured, pressing herself against the cold rock. "We are trapped here. The vehicles will surround us." Jamal didn't panic. He scanned the granite formation they were hiding against. It was huge, a monolithic rock, deeply scored by wind erosion, looking like a resting sentinel. He noticed a small, narrow fissure at the base of the rock, almost completely obscured by loose sand and pebbles. It was too small to be a cave, but large enough for a burrowing animal. "The syndicate thinks like soldiers," Jamal said, his eyes fixed on the fissure. "They look for paths, cover, and shadows. They will never look for a place of denial." "Denial?" Aisha frowned. "A place so uncomfortable, so small, that a human being would choose the sun over it. They won't waste time checking a hole where they think only a snake could hide." The sound of the engines grew deafeningly loud, confirming they were near. Into the earth. Jamal scraped the sand away from the fissure with his hands, revealing a passage just wide enough for them to squeeze through if they lay flat. "We have no choice. We go down, into the earth." Aisha didn't argue. The terror of the coming pursuit was greater than the fear of confined spaces. She slipped into the narrow gap first, pulling her injured hand close to her chest. Jamal followed, scraping his back and shoulders painfully against the sharp rock. The granite acted as a natural muffler, deadening the sound of the approaching vehicles. Just as Jamal's feet disappeared into the fissure, the first syndicate vehicle, a customized military-grade Humvee, roared past their hiding spot, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. The driver, clad in desert tactical gear and a balaclava, didn't spare a glance at the desolate granite sentinel. He was focused on the horizon, searching for tracks. They waited in the stifling black silence until the roar of the vehicles had faded into distant, continuous growl, a circling predator. When the dust settled, Jamal lit his tiny oil lamp again. They were in a low, tight tunnel that angled sharply downward. The air was cool and surprisingly humid. "The Granite Sentinel," Jamal whispered, translating the ancient name for the rock formation. "This tunnel leads to the cistern." After a few minutes of agonizing crawl, the tunnel opened suddenly into a vast, cavernous chamber. The air was sweet, clean, and cool. And then they saw it. A massive, perfectly circular pool of dark, still water, reflecting the faint light from a single, high-up ventilation shaft. The oasis of the forgotten. But the relief was fleeting. Just as they were about to rush toward the water, a single deliberate movement caught Jamal's eye. Sitting cross-legged on a natural rock platform, patiently waiting, was a figure. It was Kale. His clothing was torn, his face was bruised and cut, but he was very much alive. He had obviously found a secondary escape route from the collapsed chamber. He was holding a piece of heavy technical equipment, and, resting casually beside him, was a high-powered, suppressed rifle. "The famous guide, Jamal al-Saif. I knew you wouldn't die in the dark, but I also knew where the old reservoir was. And now I have the water, and soon I will have the coin." Kale's ultimatum. The air in the cavernous chamber was cool and damp,
a physical relief from the heat of the desert, but the tension radiating from Kale was hotter than the sun. He sat calmly, the suppressed rifle resting across his knees, a picture of calculating menace. He had clearly recovered from Jamal's kick. "Welcome to the oasis of the forgotten," he said, his voice echoing eerily. "I knew the guide's logic. If the surface is a trap, the water must be underground. I used the service tunnels to flank you." He gestured to the vast, dark pool. "The water is sweet, but access is expensive." Aisha, seeing the water, felt her control snap. She took a desperate step forward. "Kale, we are dying of thirst. Let us drink. We can still escape together." Kale raised the rifle slightly, the dark muzzle tracking her movement. "We are no longer partners, merchant. You and the guide sealed my escape route and my objective. I am now stuck here, waiting for the syndicate to blast their way down. I need two things before that happens: the Akkad coin and a fast exit." Jamal held his ground, shielding Aisha slightly. "You escaped, apprentice. You have the freedom of the desert. The coin will bring the syndicate to your door." "It already has," Kale replied, a cold smile touching his lips. "I use this to send a modified message to my employers. I told them the guide and the merchant escaped with the coin and are heading east toward the Atlas Mountains, the direction where the doctor ran. They will be chasing ghosts for hours." "You betrayed your co-conspirator?" Aisha spat. "He was disposable," he shrugged. "Like you. Now, the coin, guide. Your companions are thirsty. The tax for the water is the key." Jamal knew Kale wouldn't hesitate. He was a survivor, ruthless and focused.
Jamal slowly reached into his inner robe, his hand closing around the silver Akkad coin. He kept his eyes fixed on Kale's. "You don't understand the coin's true value, apprentice," Jamal said, his voice deliberate. "It is not just a key to the device, it is a lure. It marks its holder. That's why Akkad fell." He didn't pull the coin out. Instead, he pulled out the small oil lamp he had been carrying. He held it out, letting the weak light flicker. "The syndicate won't stop until they have the coin. You will be trading a moment of freedom for a lifetime of pursuit." Kale's eyes narrowed, momentarily distracted by the lamp. "You take your chances. Now!" As Kale barked the command, Jamal did two things at once. He shoved the lamp hard toward the pool of water, the flickering light hitting the dark surface. He simultaneously threw a handful of the heavy, gritty sand he had gathered from the fissure entrance straight into Kale's face. The sand was a blinding irritant. Kale roared in surprise and pain, squeezing his eyes shut instinctively. His rifle shot went wide, the bullet echoing deafeningly against the high ceiling of the chamber and striking the rock high above the water. But the real diversion was the lamp. The oil, mixing with the water, created a small, oily slick right near the edge of the pool. The exchange. "To the water, Aisha! Now!" Jamal yelled. Aisha, seizing the precious seconds, scrambled past Kale and plunged her head and injured hand into the pool, drinking deeply. Jamal tackled Kale, driving him against the smooth rock platform. Kale was younger, but Jamal was hardened by years of desert survival and trained in Bedouin close combat. He used his weight and leverage, trying to disarm the rifle. They struggled violently. The rifle skittered across the smooth stone floor and slid into the shallow edge of the pool, splashing the oil slick. "You fool! You have ruined the water!" Kale gasped, rubbing his gritty eyes. "The water is fine, but your exit just became flammable." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flint and steel fire starter, a necessity for survival. He scraped the steel against the flint, sending a shower of sparks directly onto the oily slick near the edge of the pool. The oil immediately ignited. With a whoosh, creating a low-spreading ribbon of fire that separated KL from the narrow tunnel exit. KL was trapped on the rock platform, facing the pool. Jamal and Aisha were on the opposite side, the tunnel leading to the granite sentinel now safely behind them, but their rifle was floating uselessly in the water. "You cannot hold me here, guide," KL shouted, looking desperately for another way out. "No," Jamal agreed, recovering his breath. "But you cannot reach me. I am leaving you a prize, apprentice." Jamal took the Akkad coin, the ultimate lure, and threw it hard, not at KL, but at the far wall of the cavern. The silver coin struck the rock with a sharp clang, falling into a deep, narrow fissure. It disappeared completely, wedged out of sight and reach. "The Syndicate wants the coin?" Jamal taunted. "They will have to dig for it, and they will have to dig right past you to get it." KL screamed in frustration and rage. He was trapped in the oasis, surrounded by fire and water, waiting for his employers to arrive and find him holding neither the key nor the weapon. Jamal grabbed the now revitalized Aisha. "We move. We are too close to the surface. Their pursued vehicles will return when they realize they've been sent on a false trail." They rushed back toward the granite sentinel tunnel, leaving the oasis of the forgotten and the trapped, enraged KL to his fate. They had survived, but they were still on foot, weaponless, and heading into a desert that was about to turn against them again.